So, hi there, and welcome to Poetry Passages. I'm Clifford Rames, and I'm so lucky and pleased to have the poet Neil Elder with us today. Neil is a poet from the United Kingdom, currently lives in London. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. And is the author of 5 books. His latest poetry collection, Like This, is now available from Forward Press. Neil, thank you so much for coming on the program. And it's so nice to see a face and name,
Yeah, put them
a
together.
face to the name that I have come to know and admire on social media. So, welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. That's very kind.
So, for folks who may not be familiar with you or are being introduced to you for the first time today, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, as you say, I live in the UK. I'm um, in Harrow in northwest London,
Mhm.
and by day I'm an English teacher,
Oh,
perhaps
nice.
like so many writers, and I've got two children who are sort of grown or growing up. And yeah, I've been writing for a little while now. I suppose I was slow to come to it. For years, I wasn't in teaching or anything. I was doing other things and came to it. And, so I got the bug, I suppose. And I've been writing poetry primarily for a number of years now.
Mm.
Yeah.
How many years? I mean, when did you approximately when
Um,
did you start? You
what have
did
we
you
got?
have 5 books, so it's been
10 years,
10
maybe.
years. So five
Yeah.
books in 10
Yeah.
years. That's pretty good.
Well, yeah, yeah. They're not great big doorsteps.
The doorstoppers. Huh? um, well, I mean, so do you write every day, or what's kind of your process?
um,
Or
I suppose I get the genesis of an idea or something I'd like to write about, and
Mhm.
I often think it's if I can use a crude sort of analogy, it's a bit like if you get something stuck in your teeth
Right.
and it's there and you're sort of working away at it, and then when it comes loose, that's that satisfaction.
Uh-huh.
And that's this sort of idea sits in your head, and maybe you turn it over as you go to work or going to sleep. Probably I just get a line, and then I take a little time to work towards putting it on paper, to committing it to paper, and I'll handwrite first before typing it up. So I'll try and get a version handwritten, and then when typing it up, it changes again because you start thinking about the shape of it and the line endings and so forth. So, and then it's that sort of whittling away. But I'm a member of we have something here called a stanza, which is a sort of a poetry workshop group, and there are different stanzas across the country, and I'm in one locally, and I think there are if we were all there, there'd be 11 of us. And you can write a theme or a non-theme poem. Each month we meet, and the way it works is, we get together, and I'd read my poem, and then I'd say nothing, and the group would talk about the poem as though I'm not there, and they discuss it, analyze it, and then
Yeah.
eventually they kind of talk themselves out, and they'd say, Neil, would you like to come in, is there anything you'd like to say? And you say, well, uh, oh, thank you very much, or you say, well, actually, I was trying to say this, or I thought and sometimes it could be it could be fairly
Mm,
brutal. They say, well, I think you should get rid of the first stanza, and somebody else says, well, I think you could live without the last stanza, and before you know it, the whole thing's shrunk down, and you've got
sure.
something to go away and really think about.
It's
But that gives me a focus, I suppose, knowing that
mm,
each month I should aim to produce something. I so far I haven't ever gone without anything.
Right.
So
It's
it gives
poetry as community in a way.
yeah,
it's wonderful.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very helpful to hear. Often, generally the people are right. They say,
Mhm.
well, or it's somehow it's clear in your own mind, and then when you step back, you think, well, yeah, I suppose that is a bit of a leap. I need to take the reader with me more
Right.
Gently,
More gently. Yeah.
something like that.
Sure. Well, I love the analogy of the piece of food stuck in your tooth. And I envision a future book with a fellow on the front cover with a piece of spinach in his teeth, and it'd be an inside joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, in the introduction to Like This, which I'll show the book again, you've referred to this book as a pamphlet, which I found is curious. I don't know, because when I think of pamphlets, I think of sort of subversive scrolls of like anti-government manifestos and arguments of outrage about the moral issues of the day. Tell us about this pamphlet of yours. What did you set out to accomplish with the poems?
Well, I suppose most of it was put together during lockdown and the height of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't quite know whether that really had a bearing, but it meant that I wanted a slightly lighter touch, or I was feeling the need for more kindness or something, because it was, obviously at the peak of things, turning on the telly, or it was relentless and gloomy, So I was looking for something a bit more joyful.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm always interested in is that gap between what we think we know about each other and ourselves and what we actually know. So there's always that sort of dual perspective,
right?
That you make assumptions about people, but you don't really know what is actually happening below the surface. And so I try and explore that gap in the writing.
Well, and on that note, I was thinking about this first poem that you're going to read. These moments will keep you warm. It is that sort of moment, this glimpse into a life where kindness rules the day, right? And positivity and hope rules the day, and we need more of that. And so I was wondering if you would read that poem for us.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, you're right. It's really about the very small acts that can shape your day, but shape your response. It doesn't have to be something huge and momentous and on a grand scale. It could be as small scale as some of the things that I touch on here.
Those sort of gentle little moments.
Yeah. So I'll read it. Yeah, it's called "These Moments Will Keep You Warm." The morning is an artist's impression, but you have no storage space available. The girl down the carriage who turns her face 3/4 towards you is beautiful, a Renaissance figure in rush hour. She looks up from her phone long enough to see an old woman standing. The girl gestures, gets up to swap. The woman sinks into the seat and smiles. Someone taps you on the shoulder, handing you the glove you've unwittingly let fall from a pocket.
Lovely. Thank you. It reminds me of something I witnessed on the subway once. It was a very different kind of moment, but there was a homeless guy. Normally people don't pay attention to homeless guys. They're just riding the subway, and people actually try to avoid them. But this guy was looking at some businessman in a suit. And finally he spoke up and he said to the businessman in the suit, "Hey fellow, it's casual Friday. Take off your tie." The business guy was like, he didn't know what to think. And
That's
then,
a
and
good
then,
one.
and then a few minutes later, the homeless guy was like, you could see he was like staring at his ragged assortment of bags. And he kind of just started talking to himself and he goes, "This is what happens to an honest man in New York." It was a very poignant little moment. I don't know, for some reason your poem reminded me of that
There's
that memory that I had of the New York City subway.
yeah. Well, you've got a title for a poem there, "An Honest Man in New York." That's
An honest man in New York. This is what happens. Well, getting back to a little bit of what you said earlier, you said in the preface to your book that you did search for a more delicate and positive tone
yeah.
for these poems, a tone that you normally wouldn't employ. So it got me curious, had you not done that, what kind of poems would have popped out of you? Poems of outrage and manifestos?
Well, I think I have quite a sort of ironic, perhaps cynical view on matters. My the first book I had, Codes of Conduct, that sort of divides into two halves, and the first half is about essentially about a character by the name of Henderson and his life in an office. And he's always sort of looking to get to, he will duck out of work and do very little all day. And and as he's leaving, the boss says, "Oh, well done, Henderson. You did really well today. Thanks very much." Just because the boss really doesn't know what any of his staff are doing, and Henderson can pull a fast one. So these moments where there's a sort of an irony, a bit of a cynical, take on people. So I was trying to avoid that, really, or move away from that, because, as I said, it was sort of felt with the lockdown and so forth, just that we needed to be more gentle, really, which perhaps, I don't know, that sounds kind of foolish, but that was absolutely how I felt. And what I wanted to get across. So, yeah, I think generally perhaps some of the other stuff would be a bit more biting.
A bit more biting, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Codes of Conduct behind you there, the red book on the shelf.
Yeah, that red one, yeah.
Yeah, I see it. Well, I mean, and you think you did achieve it. There's plenty of playfulness and hope and moments of unexpected joy in otherwise serious or sad times in this book. And one of my favorite poems is Reading Thomas Savage, which I revisit a lot, and just to remind myself to stop being so serious about stuff and find reasons to just let go and laugh sometimes. And it's got a wonderful ending, which I think people will love. So would you read that for us?
Yeah, of course. I'd love to. Do you have makes a reference to a television program.
I did have to look it up because I think it's exclusive to the UK, but
is it called "I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here," which, they take this bunch of celebrities and they have to live in sort of, well, it used to be in the Australian outback or something, and they'd have to make camp and so forth and do trials.
Right.
A little bit, it's just a reality show that, so what? Some people love it,
Right.
And so, yeah, absolutely. I have this poem, Reading Thomas Savage, and a film just came out of the book that I refer to. The book is The Power of the Dog. I haven't seen the film. It's got Benedict Cumberbatch in, but I need to track it down, see whether because I love the novel, really love it. So, yeah, absolutely. So you have to picture it. I'm upstairs, the family are downstairs, and I'm a very serious literary kind of bloke reading Thomas Savage. Upstairs, I am reading the last 2 chapters of The Power of the Dog. It's another tale of people suffering and struggling before they get what they want or don't. Downstairs, my wife and daughter are watching I'm a Celebrity, which also involves adversity and tears. And although I have enjoyed the book, its ending powerful and pleasing, what I will remember most about this evening is the sound of my daughter howling with laughter. She was having a great time downstairs watching this sort of throwaway TV. And, I'm upstairs on my own reading this book. So who's having the most fun? I don't know.
So this moment of high literature was punctuated by the most simple of pleasures, the sound of your daughter laughing. It's wonderful. So the book, like this, I find has a curious title, and which can be sort of a little ambiguous. And you have actually said it's playfully ambiguous. What did you mean by that?
Well, what did you say the title of the book was? Like This. Yeah, exactly. Or is it
or like this? Or yeah, like exactly. This?
Or is it Facebook? Like this, kind of desperate.
Exactly. Please like this.
Life is like this, or life is not like this. So it was really that. I mean, it's very difficult, or I don't know. It's difficult to come up with a title for your own work, I think, or one that you've got so many options and you've got to settle for one, and you've got to hopefully like it. So I was amusing myself maybe with the possible puns, imagining, a question mark on the end or an exclamation mark.
Right.
Yeah. And then I suppose often poets, the title of collections are after the name of a poem. And mine is not. I don't know whether that was a blunder, but we mentioned codes of conduct earlier. This is perhaps childish, but I still get a kick when I'm in a meeting or something, because I work in a school, and they're talking about, the code of conduct.
Yeah.
And I still sort of think, yes, there it is. It's part of everybody's
I
language.
have a book.
Yeah. So it was something similar with,
Yeah.
like this.
Well, one of your poems, called Birthday Surprise, a poem I absolutely adore, by the way, is a great example of how a poem can shift direction or tone, taking a turn that can surprise and delight the reader while also putting up a sort of curtain of ambiguity. Again, that ambiguity to reveal something about the poet, something from his soul, his or her soul. I was wondering if you would read that one for us, because it's such a delightful but poignant poem. With a surprise appearance. That's the title.
Absolutely. I don't think it needs much setup. It's a stiff Englishman trying to have a good time, Right.
And someone comes along, right?
Yeah. It's a birthday surprise. While my wife holds a cake upon which are too many candles for my liking, I attempt to find a smile that says both I'm so grateful and I'm really enjoying myself, but all I've got is some awkward hybrid expressing neither joy nor gratitude. Scanning the faces of friends and family who are giving happy birthday a go, I see my father, a surprise, because he has been dead so long and he always hated parties. In fact, sometime in his 40s, he adopted a scorched earth policy towards family celebrations as a whole. Birthdays and weddings were scorned. Christmas was just a fuss. Every joyous occasion seemed to be too much for him to bear. He came to hate the small talk the bother, the disruption to his shrinking life. And so it's strange to see him here tonight. It's good to see you, Dad. What a surprise. When he joins in with the singing, the smile for which I've searched arrives. But by the time the song has stopped, he's ducked out, gone to be alone.
Wow. Wonderful. So I was thinking, as you're reading that, you mentioned that you have a tendency towards cynicism, and there's a bit of that cynicism in the beginning of this poem. But then you kind of take a gentle curve towards the end, and there's this tenderness and this heart-tugging moments with your father, and you see in the smile from their father that you've been waiting for. It's so wonderful. It reminded me actually of George Bilger, who has sort of that style. He kind of like, in the beginning of his poem, a lot of his poems, he's kind of like being cynical, right? You're like, what's this guy? What's him? And then he takes this swerve, and then he's like tugging your heartstrings at the end. You're like, oh, wonderful. And speaking of George Bilger, who is a wonderful poet in his own right, he called your book a dazzling collection. So if I may ask, how the heck did you get George Bilger to write a blurb for your book?
I know. That's what I'm wondering. Well, I suppose if we trace things back a little bit, you and I both know Clifford, because this is how we've come to hook up. Billy Collins, a great poet, began his sort of Facebook broadcasts,
poetry broadcast,
lockdown again, way back. It must have been March 2020, around then. And I don't know how, but somehow I was in on those early broadcasts, and I got hooked and watched every day. And as you know, Billy Collins, he reads some of his own work, but he also reads work or introduces the listeners, the viewers, to other poets' work.
Right.
And one of those was George Bilger. And the poem in particular that I remember he read, I think, is The Forge, one with the dad trying to hit the tricycle through the car windscreen in fury at life. And I was gripped by that. So I explored, got onto Google, etc., and looked up George Bilger, because he's not actually really, whisper it, I mean, he should be world famous, but he hadn't really come on the radar for me over here.
Right.
And so, absolutely. I, discovered him, devoured his work. And I don't know, at some point, then knowing that like this was going to come along, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have somebody, an American poet,
right?
And wouldn't, and I must admit, I thought that you mentioned this, we sort of perhaps chime or an echo of each other, it wasn't so out of the way.
Right.
So, the internet, we can, curse it for a lot of things, but it meant that I was able to get in touch with George.
Yeah.
And I made this very cheeky, kind of jovial thing about, if you ever wanted to write the blurb for an unknown British poet, blah, blah. And he said, that sounds like my kind of thing. Let me know. So, which I think says more about him than me, the generosity of the man. So I was able to email him, the manuscript, the poems, and he was very kind. And so, absolutely. It's been a real thrill for me, and a real highlight. Absolutely,
Well, it's a wonderful connection, and I believe even Billy Collins read one of your poems during his broadcast, which I thought must have been over the moon for you. Well, I wanted to read what George Bilger wrote in full. He wrote, Neil Elder's poems wash over you. They can be deft and unobtrusive, but they stay with you like that moonstone. And we'll get to the moonstone in a minute. So for whatever it's worth, I totally agree with George. And I'm going through these poems for today's broadcast. I had a really hard time selecting just a few that you could potentially read today. I just love the balance between your dry wit and that tenderness, like we talked about in the birthday surprise poem, and those little moments of cynicism, outrage, and irreverence. There's this wonderful irreverence that comes through so much of your work, and it's balanced out by this sort of almost childlike wonder and joy at the world, which is a wonderful touch. On that note, we're getting back to the Moonstone. The theme is, which is the poem that George Bilger was referring to. Would you read that? Would you read that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just tie up a few strands. So earlier on, I mentioned this poetry workshop group that we go to. And, there's a theme each month, and you can write on the theme or you don't have to write on the theme. And one month, the theme was the moon. I thought, where do you start with that? So turned it over in my head. And I do have it. Here it is in my hand. This is a stone. I don't know how clearly you can see it. And it is absolutely spherical. Okay. And not every poem, as you know, not every poem is sort of real or autobiographical or anything, but this has a genesis in that, because when my father died and we were concerned with his ashes, etc., we were on a beach in Norfolk in England, and I found this stone.
You found that?
And so the stone became connected with my father in my mind. So when this idea of the theme is the moon, I thought, well, I don't know how to, that's such a massive thing, and it's been so, everybody's written about the moon and so forth. Right. So how would I approach that? And I realized, well, here is this, stone. Maybe I go the other way and I say, well, I can't write about that. So as you ask, I'll read. The theme is, this is where I duck out. The moon's too big for just one person. Give me a tiny moonstone to write about, or better still, a moon-shaped stone that fits upon my palm. Like the stone I took away from the shore the day I gave an urn of ashes to the sea, a trade that, like the tide, keeps returning you to me.
Beautiful. Ooh, wonderful. Thank you. So that stone, is it a natural formation? Is that a natural rock?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? What kind of stone it is? Don't know.
You got me there. I should have invested.
It's a moonstone. We'll leave it at that. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Neil. I just wanted to ask you, sort of to kind of wrap things up, what's next for you? Are you writing? How often are you write every day now? And do you have any new books in the works?
I don't manage to write every day, but I've got a number of poems in the bank that some I've got, I submit to magazines, etc. Some are just sitting there, waiting for the chance of being published, really. I had one recently that I have a little blog post and I need to update it. And there's a little video of me reading a poem called Bath Time.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, have you seen?
I've seen it.
It's just a bit of fun. yeah, I'm writing, and perhaps down the line, they'll be able to be put out, published. That,
Mhm.
but that would be some time away, I think.
Then,
You know,
do you find
yeah.
yourself writing more since the pandemic, or less, or about the same as before?
Um, about the same. I mean,
About the
it, it
same. Yeah.
it comes in fits and spurts, doesn't it? I think
Mhm.
you can sort of. I don't think you. It's easy to start worrying that you're not gonna, that you haven't written one for a bit, or but it will come. I think
Right. Right.
is my experience anyway. That
Right.
I mean, I've got a couple of ideas that I need to. They're loose, too loose to sit down and put pen to paper. I need to get something more with them, but there's stuff happening.
Good. Well, that's good to know. And we look forward to anything that you come up with, because your poetry is so wonderful. And I want to
That's kind
just
of it.
thank you for sharing it with us today. Yeah, your blog is neilelderpoetry.wordpress.com. I'll put that up at the end of the video so people can find you and find your books if they wanted to buy
Thank
them.
you. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Thanks, Neil, so much for coming on Poetry Passages. And we hope.
Well, I have to thank you. You're very, kindly hosting this, and you're generous to invite me along. So thank
It's
you very
been
much.
fun. It's been great. Thank you so much. And we hope everyone enjoyed that. And we thank you for watching, and stay well and stay safe. And we'll see you all again real soon, right here on Poetry Passages. And bye, Neil. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.